Here's something people have been circulating online for weeks now, a theory that seems almost unbelievable. The claim? That the current war in the Middle East wasn't just a geopolitical conflict, that it was orchestrated, at least in part, to cover up the Epstein files. Most sensible people, myself included at first, rejected this idea outright. Wars cost hundreds of billions of dollars. Thousands of lives are at stake. The idea that all of this was staged to cover up a scandal? Ridiculous, isn't it? But then things happened that made me stop and think. This has happened before. Let's start with history, because history doesn't repeat itself, but it echoes. In 1998, Bill Clinton was president. He was already facing a sexual harassment lawsuit from a previous case, and during his sworn testimony, he was asked directly, "Did you have a relationship with Monica Lewinsky?" He said no, under oath. Months later, a blue dress surfaced. DNA evidence. The lie was exposed. Congress began impeachment proceedings. The vote was scheduled for December 16th. On December 16th, Clinton launched Operation Desert Fox, a 4-day bombing campaign against Iraq. His stated justification: Saddam Hussein's refusal to cooperate with UN weapons inspectors. The vote on his impeachment was postponed. The New York Times ran the headline, "Clinton impeachment vote postponed because of Iraq strike." The media and the public clearly saw what was happening, and yet, it worked. The news cycle shifted. Clinton was ultimately acquitted. Then, months later, he launched a 78-day air campaign against Serbia. Again, observers said it was a diversionary tactic. This wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was being openly observed. Analysts called it a diversionary war, a concept in political science that describes how leaders create or escalate external conflicts to distract from domestic crises. The term even has a name in media studies: news cycle displacement. When a big story breaks, it pushes everything else down the road. Not because of a conspiracy, just because of the nature of human attention. Now comes the interesting part. In the weeks leading up to the current dispute, something significant was happening regarding the Epstein files. Courts were releasing documents. Google Trends data showed a sharp increase in searches for Epstein files. And for the first time in history, a former US president, Bill Clinton, was compelled to testify in a civil case related to Epstein's network. It was, by most accounts, the most active period of accountability in the entire Epstein affair. Clinton's testimony lasted 4.5 hours. When asked if he had ever lied under oath, a clearly pointed question given his history, he said no. When questioned about his 17 to 26 documented trips on Epstein's private plane, including flights to Florida, Africa, and Europe, he downplayed the relationship, describing Epstein as barely a casual acquaintance. When photos surfaced showing him in a swimming pool with unidentified young women, he claimed he didn't know who they were. His lawyer reportedly leaned in and whispered in his ear during the testimony. Whatever was said, Clinton stopped answering. 4 days before the war broke out, researchers and legal analysts discovered that roughly 90 of the 325 FBI interview files related to the Epstein investigation were missing. Not redacted, missing. Then, a few days later, the Justice Department released 2 previously withheld files. The excuse given for withholding them was that they were duplicates. They weren't. These files contained witness statements describing alleged assaults on a 13-year-old girl who named Donald Trump. The accounts were vivid and shocking. According to the documents, the girl reported being taken from Epstein's island multiple times, flown to New York and New Jersey, and presented to a wealthy man described as a real estate mogul. She identified him as Trump. When she resisted, she said she was physically assaulted. The FBI interviewed the witnesses. It indicated it lacked sufficient evidence to proceed. But critics point out, if the files are incomplete, if 90 interviews have simply disappeared, how can that assessment be accurate? One former investigator noted that 3.5 million files have been released to the public, while the actual archive is estimated at 6.5 million. Nearly half remains classified. What we really know: the news cycle shift is real, but it's automatic in times of war. Correlation is not causation. Moreover, the war contradicts Trump's stated goal of ending wars. The Epstein network is real. The missing files and documents and witnesses are real. The pattern, when accountability looms and something sensational happens, had already emerged in 1998. More accurately, Is this the only reason? Probably not. Was it beneficial to those in those files? Probably yes. And the fundamental question that remains unanswered: people who didn't hesitate to commit the described crimes against children, why would they hesitate to do anything else?